Recording in progress.
You know, when I saw your haircut the other day on the live stream,
I think I might be missing some context from early in the stream.
I wanted to say that you're a lot more aerodynamic now for, sailing through space.
Yeah. Hopefully that'll help me traverse the conceptual landscape, less clouding my head.
You won't have to worry about the hair getting in your eyes anyway when you have to do the Superman thing.
Yeah. Won't have to run around like a crazy man looking for my hat before we start the call.
Totally.
So just before we started, you had mentioned, you referenced I made another itinerary thing.
A lot of ideas in Gemini.
And it got a little unwieldy this time.
Doing donuts in the parking lot.
Let me find it here.
It's not unwieldy. It's fun. Looks like fun to me.
Plans, possibilities. It's fast moving.
It reminded me of that I thought that clip it reminded me of that Luke Thompson clip. I thought it was so perfect.
Jesus was God and Jesus became God, because that distinction falls apart in the identity of identity and non-identity. And everything that's true of Christ, I think, will eventually be true of us. And I know a lot of people don't want to go there, but that's because they don't want to go off script.
Itinerary.
There we go. They just want to regurgitate I don't know if they truly know what they think about things. Okay. I'm going to open the closed loop of the Ouroboros. I mean, you got to do that.
Yes. Yeah.
So this is our list.
A lot of ideas.
They're out.
Nothing strict, of course, but
No.
all sorts of stuff, and there's also other stuff from our last one. So yeah, as you said, I'm kind of down to go wherever the wind takes us,
Yeah.
Was there anything like in particular that kind of stood out to you?
Well, I mean, we could start at the top there with the Galahad conversation. I don't have much to say about it except he just came across to me as being very sympathetic. I was going to say sympathisch because that's the German word. Someone that you can relate to, I thought he was thoughtful about his answers. And I also recognized that because I have the same thing where when you're thoughtful about your answers, you're not necessarily just saying everything you're thinking, so yeah, and I think that's a good thing, actually. So restrained, let's say it like that.
Yeah.
Some things you have to just keep at a certain level. Yeah.
Yeah, you were thinking of particularly that his conversation with Tommy from CTMU Singularity. Yeah.
Is that I didn't even note the channel in my mind. It
that's
popped
who
up.
it was, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not really much of an occultist. I'm definitely too Christian for most occultists.
Mm-hmm.
But too occult for most Christians.
That little space in between. One of the things that you talked about, I can't recall which video, but is kind of the need to almost incorporate Gnosticism into a kind of more full and complete Orthodox Christianity. So is there anything where you do see yourself against the kind of orthodoxy in terms of like that?
I don't actually see, I haven't read any Gnostic materials that actually impressed me. Like the Nag Hammadi library is, maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe there's something very deep there that I don't have the prerequisite knowledge to understand. But it tends to just be a lot of speculation and the library in general tends to disagree with itself a lot.
Revving his engine.
There's a lot of contradictory things from one text to another. I think what's important, it's kind of like I said, where we had this narrative and then people broke away from it. And so in order to bring those people back, we have to take what drew them away and incorporate it back into the narrative to have a fuller story that, you know, includes all dispositions and every type of person, I think. And so Gnosticism is probably the original schism between the Orthodox and those who couldn't be Orthodox for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I think the Orthodox got the theology right, but there's something about the Gnostic spirit that I like. The sense of individualism, the sense of skepticism and critical thinking, trying to understand things for yourself. These are all virtues, I think, but they're virtues that can run away from you, that can become vices if you take them too far. And I think in the case of a lot of Gnostics, that's what happened.
Yeah, and then the point that you made was that those kind of subversive elements in the early church then eventually become the kind of subversive elements to religion, you know, the scientific and industrial and later revolutions against Christianity, that by suppressing that it needs to be incorporated almost into a higher unity.
Or it becomes a kind of satanic shadow that then becomes adversarial. So it's like the Gnostic sects inspired a lot of later secret societies. They seem to have influenced the Templars for sure. And then they bled into all kinds of other occult movements that existed at the time, certain forms of Hermeticism and things like that. So Gnosticism, it never really went away. It just saturated other things, which then became adversarial, you know, opponents to Christianity. You can kind of see a Gnostic thread in Nietzsche, in Giordano Bruno. You can kind of see it in Luther. It's everywhere. And I think people today are, you know, it's like a very extreme kind of Gnosticism that animates the modern world, where even, you know, the crass idea of escapism, you're still trying to escape the material world in some way by playing video games or watching TV or, you know, even getting drunk, taking drugs. We're constantly trying to escape materiality because we think something's wrong with it. And so even the culture of modernity is very Gnostic. It just doesn't call itself that. And so although Gnosticism tends to manifest in a very ugly form that's opposed to Christianity and to the culture that we've traditionally had, it seems to be that it contains necessary elements that have to be incorporated into our culture.
Yeah, and the like futurist element of, you know, modernity is, you know, everything's terrible now, but in the future it's going to be great, you know, next 5-year plan. That's kind of a modern incarnation of Gnosticism, because atheism and materialism didn't see an ability to posit, you know, a kind of higher world separate from material matter, that you can have a future world separate from present, you know, material reality.
Modern thinking is very defined by horizontality. And so we can't have the world here and then something up here, because we can't conceive of this anymore. It has to be over here or it has to be over here. So there can either be, this is the traditionalist idea, there's a golden age that we're constantly moving away from, or there's a golden age in the future that we're moving towards. But we can't conceive of, you know, a higher world, a kind of heavenly world that just occasionally manifests below us or below itself.
He mentioned you. He mentioned you at the very beginning. Yeah.
Quick shout out to Jonathan Demir. He got us in touch.
I don't mean to toot my own horn, just put it out there.
Yeah.
It was because Tommy made a video that really resonated with me, and that I felt kind of contributed to the whole shebang or whatever. It was, he made a video about how the cosmos is alive, and talking about cosmologos, you know, like cosmology, like the logos of the cosmos, and how, you know, God is manifest in creation. And yeah, that one struck me as really resonant, particularly because I was looking for the clue regarding the galactic center at the time. You know, like I had noticed that it was like I was just trying to put those pieces together. And you know, also astrology is about celestial bodies and stuff. So that was all kind of interesting to me. So I made a video of that, and I used Galahad's visuals.
Lift up your eyes and see. Who created these? He who sends out their host by count, who calls them each by name. Because of his great might and vast power, not one fails to appear. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is God from of old, creator of the earth from end to end. He never grows faint or weary. His wisdom cannot be fathomed. The light shine forth in the darkness. May the peace of our Father in heaven be upon you. If I can describe. Peace.
And then when I sent the video to Tommy, I was like, "Hey, in the visuals, just so you know what's going on here," and he found him interesting. And then they had, they actually I first heard of the CTMU from Griffin, and then that kind of like I looked into it, and that's when I found Tommy, and then Tommy looked into Griffin's work, and he said that it's basically in keeping with the CTMU, which I thought was pretty cool. So, yeah.
Did you know? You must have heard of Cal Rivet or Cal Rivet.
I'm having trouble matching the face, but I definitely.
He's had a few conversations with Wayne recently. But anyway, he's a huge CTMU guy. You might want to talk to him about that, because I don't know much about it really, but Cal knows a lot about it.
Really, I don't know a whole lot about it either. Yeah, this guy. Let me see. Yes, I've seen this guy. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, perhaps. Yeah, that's. I've watched. Yeah, I remember.
I think you guys could have a fun conversation actually, because Cal was raised Hare Krishna as well, and then he became a Christian later in life. So yeah, I don't know. I think you might have.
I think. Yeah, I've heard him talk about it. I haven't made a clip of him yet. That I can recall. However, actually, I think he might have been in the clip called "The Personal God" that you were. I think you might have been in that one too. I'm not sure.
Like I said in that live stream, if you sign on the dotted line to an image that somebody has described for you, you have confessed faith in a fact, not a person.
Right. The only time that God has ever become objective is as a person. He's never merely an object. He's objectively visible. But once again, that just goes back to the Luke 24. Like, they saw him. They could describe him. They could make judgments about him. They could tell you about him. But did they know him? No, not until that moment.
Right. What God likes about my theology isn't the quote unquote like rigor or smartness or whatever. It's the fact that it was I who thought to ask these questions. Mm-hmm. It's my person that somehow invests the theology with value from God's standpoint.
Yeah, I've seen him around. He's, he seems to be pretty sharp cookie.
He's very sharp. Yeah, and him and Luke Thompson talk a lot. Are friends.
Yeah, I think that's probably where I've heard his name.
I refer to him quite often. Yeah.
Heard that. So that was. Was there any kind of that was definitely. That was his first appearance on YouTube, talking about Griffin again. So, it's like you, I definitely got that vibe as well, that he's a little restrained, but I think appropriately so. And, was there any kind of like thing in particular that I already have all sorts of nervous thoughts running through my head. Like, I don't want to, there's so much that could be said about like what I think about this guy and my conversation with him and I don't want to appear like I idolize him or anything, but obviously I think he's, his work is super interesting. So I can't help but ask, like, was there anything like particularly?
Nothing really stood out. I listened to that very first video he made afterwards because I was just curious.
I saw a gigantic being within it. It was framed and enveloped by the fire, but I could see its form clearly as though the sun were only a window. There in the center was something called the Star of Glory. It was made of feathered wings fashioned from bright gold, all extending from a point of blinding light. There were no discernible features other than these. It was just light and 6 wings. I felt that this had been the thing calling, that it had always been calling, that it was the very thing at the end of time calling the present to the future. And then it spoke.
Let die he who would die, he who would live shall live against all odds.
As soon as it spoke, I was thrown out into space. The vision faded into blackness, and I could not call it back. I went to the mirror and I saw my pupils were normal. It was over. Now, this experience really made an impact on me.
And I don't know, like when I listen to things like that, I have to, they're there and they're like seeds that just, will grow over time.
Yeah. Not jumping to any conclusions.
No.
Yeah.
Like I don't have anything good or bad to say about it. Like I can just let it be what it is. And and it was interesting.
Heard that. Yeah, I put in our little outline heresy question mark in parentheses, because I feel like a lot of people when they
No, I don't think like that.
Yeah, I know you don't. And that's part of the reason I appreciate you, Shari, because you don't just box things in like right away. And yeah, I feel like that's kind of the question when some guy rolls up and starts saying the types of things that he's saying.
Lo, Abraxas, to thy pupil cometh sight, for from thy shadow shineth light. This is not the kind of thing I tend to write.
He's like, is this guy, a heretic? And by heretic, I use that in kind of the way that Luke Thompson uses it, where it's like, this guy is causing division. He's like, that's really like, I think the real meaning is like, is he kind of causing division, or is he trying to create like unity?
Well, I think if he was trying to cause division, he wouldn't be restrained.
Yeah.
That's why it's a good thing.
Yeah. One might say, it's intention versus actuality, but I think the intention's probably, more important. And I don't,
something happened to him that was life-changing, and he was compelled to share it. And he did what he was told, so to speak, right?
I wrote what the star said right away and then recorded the whole thing.
And I can't fault someone for that ever, really. So like you have on your outline guardian angels, and he had angelic interactions, right? According to his video.
What I saw didn't look like this. It looked somewhere between this and this. The seraph which I saw sounds to me more like what Isaiah described. What struck me most of all, though, was not this consistency. It was the Hebrew meaning of the word seraph. It means the burning one.
So, and I just happen to have a sister who's constantly seeing angels. And she doesn't use psychedelics. She sees them all the time. And so yeah, like when I hear his story and I hear him talking about his experience, I'm like, yeah. And time will tell, right? Like Jesus said, everything, we know a thing by its fruit. And that means you have to wait and see. Wait and watch and see. But you have to look at it with a delicate empiricism like Goethe,
How do we actually encounter this physical property of weight empirically? If I take the candle and hold it in my hand, I will experience its weight as a kind of resistance. But it may very well be the case that another person experiences this resistance more strongly. A child, for example, might experience the weight of the candle as far greater as the child's arms and hands are much smaller. One might then argue that regardless of how we might subjectively experience the property of weight, we can nevertheless use a measuring device to determine the objective weight of the candle as it exists independently of any such relationships. We can place the candle upon such a device and declare that the number produced by the device represents the truly real weight of the candle, as different measuring devices will all produce the same number. But the reality is that these measuring devices are specifically designed to relate to weight in the exact same way. All we have proven through this demonstration is that all of our various measuring devices have been correctly calibrated to produce the same numbers for the same objects. We have taken advantage of the constancy of physical matter in order to artificially remove the empirical experience of weight from our calculations. The empirical reality of weight falls by the wayside, and the epistemological primacy of human eyes and hands comes to be replaced by mechanical devices. To say that the weight of the candle is always measured to be the same by our mechanical instruments is fundamentally no different than saying that the candle always smells the same to me. The mechanical devices artificially create a kind of invariant perspective, which can attempt to circumvent the fundamentally relational nature of empirical reality. We delude ourselves into believing that we have achieved an objective, God's eye perspective upon the phenomenon of weight by stepping outside of our own perspectives, when in reality we have only replaced our own perspectives with those of machines. If we are to hold fast to the epistemological primacy of empirical experience, then we must come to see that nature and human consciousness are not divided by a rigid boundary of objectivity and subjectivity. Rather, the world which we actually encounter empirically is of a fundamentally phenomenological, interrelational, and intersubjective character.
You have to observe this gets to a whole bunch of things that I've been thinking about for a long time, like McGilchrist's book that I really would love to get my hands on and read, Against Criticism, because I don't know if you watched the conversation I had with Jed recently, but
No, but
I read
I
read a quote out of Max Leif's Substack about not knowing, right, unknowing, or what it is you can actually see if you believe you already know something. You know, if you believe you already know something and you look at something, you don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to look at it believing that you don't know anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why years ago I wrote a note to myself that, you know, it's time to take a step away from everything I thought I always knew about God.
Mm-hmm.
And try, because, you know, you can't erase what you already know, but try to just have those things take a back seat and make a fresh approach, something like that.
The open circle or the spiral.
We're done. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for yeah.
One of these days I'm going to I keep telling my sister, we got to have a conversation in Grail Country. Like we do. Like we usually, we don't see each other very often, even though we don't live that far away, but we're just busy. So we do these like 3-4 hour phone visits where, you know, we stick
where all the world's secrets are, you know, unraveled, and the secrets, the answers to all of our problems are hidden, you know, like, yeah, I would love to see that, you know, like, I'm sure you have great conversations.
Yeah, we stick the earbuds in and then clean house and talk, right?
That's the womanly way, right? Like to be talking while doing things, right? Like, you know, all the men would be hunting and they would be all quiet, you know, but the ladies are chatting, you know, coming up with new words and stuff.
It makes the work go by faster. But I've been, you know, constantly saying to her, we got to just do one of these on a live stream one day and just blow everybody's minds.
Drop some hot bangers, as McMo would say. The world ain't ready for these hot bangers.
Yeah.
I think it was with Shari. You were talking about, like, I can't remember exactly.
You
probably remember that better.
Yeah, is that a eurythmistic is not welcome to eurythmize, you know, like,
right, that's what it is. Yeah,
when you get that spark and you want to make the song, you know, but maybe it's not socially acceptable to make such a vibrant song.
A hot banger.
Yeah.
Dude, society's not ready for these hot eats, man.
There's a natural speaking that always wants to pour through us, which is just who we are. It's just who we are, and being who we are, and the natural feelings that connecting the mind and the body, right?
But just as the painter itches to paint when he sees something and is unable to, for he would like to paint everything but cannot always be at it.
Yeah, I'm kind of. I think that kind of leads a little bit into, you mentioned your sister and stuff. And I also recently posted a video talking about angels. It's called Astral Vision and Angels. And I was kind of thinking in terms of etheric vision being this formative whatever.
We also experience time through the etheric body.
And then astral being the next step up, which would be like the spiritual beings. Remember how in that one he was like imaginative perception, and then after that is inspiration, where you have spirits?
Yeah.
These terms should not put the reader off. Speaking of an, in quotes, astral world, we progress to specific spirit entities, just as we speak of stars and constellations.
Like that's kind of, but that's why I use the term astral. But as I say that, I noticed that there's a new Footnotes to Plato video called Etheric Imagination as Participatory 9. Excited to watch that one.
I think Whitehead has his own language for talking about what Steiner means by the etheric and the astral. He doesn't use those words, but I think, he has his own way of talking about those layers of reality. Einstein himself said that his gravitational field, his space-time manifold, was in fact just a new ether in his terms. The point is not to explain away experience by reference to some hidden mechanism behind experience, but really to stay with experience and to shed light upon it. Let me quote Steiner here. He says, "Consider the difference between the pure perception of the phenomena, that is, remaining within the phenomena and investigating and describing them, and simply making something up about the phenomena." He wants to help us imagine the etheric and astral layers of the cosmos working within and through and around the physical body, visible to our physical eyes as the etheric body and the astral body. And he wants to describe in detail how the etheric and astral bodies relate to the physical anatomy of the eye, to show us that our sensory organs and our qualitative sensory experience are not providing mere secondary characteristics, but are really showing us the qualitative essence of nature. And so we need to bring our sensory experience, our qualitative experience, back into our picture of the physical world if we hope to know it truly. So for both Goethe and Whitehead, there's an insistence that we stay with the phenomena in their full round of archetypal metamorphosis or morphogenesis, you could say. And that we stay with the evolving relationship between the perceiver and the perceived, right? Not rushing to conjure something behind phenomena, something that would be unperceived, but also unperceivable, even in principle, often in modern physics, that would supposedly explain the phenomena. We can only understand nature aright when we consider that there is to our physical senses at least, an invisible creativity, as it were, that we can come into relationship with through the further development of the scientific method beyond just natural science into spiritual science. So we'll get there in a second here. Whitehead says, "According to the view which I am putting before you, there is nothing behind the veil of the procession of becomingness, although there is much pictured on that veil and essential to it, which our dim consciousness does not readily decipher. Indeed, the metaphor of a veil of appearance is wholly wrong. Reality is nothing else than the process of becomingness, of which we are dimly conscious. The problem with materialism is that when we think materialistically, our thoughts are brain-bound. We become materialized, right? So when you look at the sun and the earth and the moon, all the other planets, you're looking at things that aren't whole. Rather, they are, Steiner says, the limbs of the entire planetary system. So there's one organism, and just as I move my arm as part of a single organism, the planets move about as the limbs of a single organism. And it's also important to recognize that just as the solar system is a kind of organism, really, for Steiner, for Whitehead, for Goethe, there is no such thing as inorganic matter. Or at least to the extent that there is such a thing as dead matter, it does not precede life. To the extent that there is dead matter, it exists as the skeletal remains of life, right? It's the excretion of life. It comes after life, not before it. There's no way to get life out of dead matter. But the main obstacle for Whitehead would be we need more people who can empirically, experientially corroborate and validate the things that Steiner is saying. And it seems that that capacity, say, for etheric perception that Steiner thought would start to come online for more and more people. I'm not sure how many of us can claim to be clairvoyant.
But you know, you mentioned.
I want to talk about
one quick thing though. One quick thing is that
Okay,
you mentioned, you know, how your sister's always seeing angels, and that's extremely interesting to me. And and you know, it's interesting because sometimes you'll hear these stories of, you know, these, you know, wheels upon wheels and eyes and stuff, right? And then other times I've heard people say angels always appear as humans, you know? And it's interesting, like, I don't know, I do think that maybe those higher angels would appear more alien almost, to use a hot word, you know, but I think the idea of angels appearing as / through humans is very interesting to me. You know, like there's a story where like people, I forget who it was who I mentioned in that, or I clipped it in that video, that like there was a story in the Bible where somebody, it took them like days or weeks to realize that it was an angel because they thought it was just a person.
Similarly, Abraham believed that the 3 angels who visited him were mortal men. And in both stories, the angels supported this impression by eating and drinking. Therefore, we see that even God's angels adapt their appearance in order that men may see and communicate with them.
You know, and stuff like that's kind of, you know, it's a little, there's interesting stuff going on here that I'm curious to pick out, you know, because, you know, connecting it back to the guardian angels, the idea that we can perceive, you know, like the true, like the perfect you or something, you know, like the you know, your higher self or whatever you want to say, like that we can actually, that's like, I don't know, I'm just curious about these types of phenomenological experiences, you know, like your sister's, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is she seeing, you know, like visual,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I don't, you know.
Yeah. I always tell her it's because she's more like an ass, and that's why she.
What do you mean?
Balaam's donkey saw the angel standing in the gate, right? And
I
wouldn't
don't
go
know.
pass through.
I'm not familiar.
There's a story in the Old Testament of Balaam who was riding his donkey, and the donkey stopped at the gate of the city and wouldn't go in because there was an angel standing there with a sword, and it was going to kill them both. And Balaam got really angry with the donkey and started beating it because he couldn't figure out why the donkey wouldn't move. And then the donkey spoke and said, "Why are you beating me? I've always been good to you," right? And so that it's just a silly joke, you know. I'm like, well, okay, the donkey could see the angel, but he didn't, right? So my sister's an ass.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, oh my gosh, just some, you know, it's super, you know, so many threads that we could go, but I want to let you continue, you know, because like the whole animals thing and the fact that you can actually, you know, you say,
I
you know,
love
the ass spoke, but it was like, you know, like you can, there are times, I'm sure you've had times where it's like an animal is speaking to you, you know?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about the donkey in that story is that it doesn't say God spoke through the donkey. It says that God loosed his tongue. God gave him the ability to speak. And the first thing he did was question the justice that was being meted out to him, right? So there's, I mean, if you want to get into the psychology of animals.
Yeah. I mean, that's on our list, but I'm also curious just kind of if you
Yeah.
have something else to say about the angels, like in particular.
Well, I can tell you because one experience is fresh in my mind because she told me this recently, and I have to be a little bit careful because it it involves somebody else and it's a little personal to them, but there's a person that she knows who has had a really, really, really rough life. Lots of drug addiction and abuse and but then strangely enough, this person is really, really hardworking and able to support their own addiction by cutting firewood and just doing really hard physical labor. The way my sister describes her, she's just a gem of a person. Like, who she is a beautiful person, but her life has been really, really, really difficult.
Well, pressure makes diamonds. And also, when you say a gem of a person, I can't help but think about, the diamond inside the cube, as we've discussed. But please go on.
So, my sister, I'm trying to remember how the story went. I think she was praying for her, and she was there. Like, the person she was praying for was with her and had asked her to pray, or something like that. Anyway, she was praying and she looked up and there was this like 7-foot tall man standing behind her, and he had really long, thick black hair. And he was dressed in rags, and she described him as being covered in scars. His face, his whole body was just covered in scars. And my sister was thinking to herself, is this a demon? Like, what the heck is this? Right? Like, she had no idea. And then it turned out, no, it was her guardian angel. And it was so beat up, basically. And a warrior, because of this person's life, because their life had been so difficult. It was a very beautiful image, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's actually like the main thing I'm trying to at least mention today with you, which is that, like, through our textual conversation, that was very kind of a helpful insight for me. We got Cal here still.
There's Cal.
We were talking about this, and right here, it's that one's guardian angel, like, let's say the good Shari principle, like the principle is trying to manifest through you, Christ in you, however you want to say it, is always trying to communicate or commune with one. But since we don't remember them or seek dialogos with them, we don't believe in them, like they suffer, or they're kind of, I don't know if you'd say lonely, but almost lonely in a sense, and maybe even, I wrote here, maybe even annoyed or angry, such that when you encounter them, they might be like, where you been? It's like, I've been doing all this work protecting you from the wrath of God, and it's like, and you don't even acknowledge me. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up, but I feel like I've heard somebody say it in that way, where it's like, it's crucial that we actually remember and that we seek our, it's really similar to put it in the most psychological, down to earth terminology I can. It's like, it's kind of like Jordan Peterson's self-authoring program. It's thinking about your highest self, and constantly returning, taking a moment and being like, what am I aiming at? Who do I want to be? And by doing that, like that being who you're imaginally communicating with is almost nourished, like, in a way, like they're reassured in their task or something like that. And yeah, that really resonates with me, such that I feel like, sorry if do you want to interject here before I
no,
keep
I'm listening.
Rolling away?
No, I'm listening.
So I think it's super important insofar as kind of what I'm suggesting is that the heaven and earth is always connected to a degree, particularly for children, you know, where the heaven that is in one's mind, their imaginal realm, is always shining, is always kind of in the patterned being. It's not like you see, yes, you know, a heavenly archetype. You know, it's more like through the subtle patterns or whatever. I say whatever, but always heaven and earth always connected, so that the spiritual beings that are relevant to a person are always kind of perceivable. Foremost among them would be the guardian angel, and in instances where the person is not, like, let's say, I'm trying to keep this brief, but I think I just have to kind of flesh it out a bit, which is that so you have the child, heaven and earth are connected, right? The guardian angel is flowing or something like that, and then when we identify with our face and we get we close the circle, and like I couldn't hear what you said there, but
get closed in.
Yeah, and in that case, one might think that then the guardian angel no longer shines through, you know. However, I think back to the faceless dancers, where it says that their sorrow is even more sorrowful, such that I suggest that only in their eyes, like, I don't know exactly how, but only in their eyes you would still see that suffering of the guardian angel, or their true child self, or whatever you want to say, in its loneliness. And you would still be able to pick up on that. You know, if you have a discerning eye and you can follow the patterns, you know, extrapolate, you can see, think about it iconically, you know, you can see that suffering. And then the idea would be to be, you know, to engage with that in a virtuous way, such that I can, you know, somebody who's walking along in their suffering, they encounter a spiritually minded person who sees them, they feel acknowledged and safe to be who they are, you know. And this is exorcism or something like that, you know. It's like a natural happening. And I also suggest that, like, you know, that's the person we're looking at. But you could say that person, if they had a more intentional relationship with their guardian angel, it, you know, they would be, I would say heaven and earth is connected in a more healthy way, or something like that. And then not just their eyes, but their whole body becomes kind of an image, maybe in the holographic sense, of that higher dimensional guardian angel. So that's kind of my, and the thing there is that this suffering, you know, it's that we mask and we hide from each other because we hate to be pierced, you know. But to be pierced and to suffer, you know, with those around me, you know, that's actually, my mind goes to McMo again, saying, you know, the world isn't ready for these hot beats, because that's where I kind of finish up this thread, which is that for me, I don't know, like I do, you know, I hesitate to suffer with people because I guess it's because I'm afraid to be pierced, but also just, you know, like that, it's like a floodgate, you know, in the doors, and then I lose myself in the other person. Like, how do we suffer with the other without losing yourself? But you know, there is a certain losing yourself which is appropriate, I think. Yeah, that's kind of where I wrap up. You know, maybe it reminds me of Douglas Harding saying, you know, we have to you know, the suffering is the way, you know. And so yeah, that's kind of my spiel.
So are you asking me that question? How do you suffer with somebody without losing yourself? Or
I forget the exact context on how that all got started.
It was her guardian angel. beat up,
almost lonely in a sense, and maybe even annoyed or angry.
Well,
We were talking about like the phenomenological seeing of that, but
We see the New Jerusalem arising out of white magic.
Sacred magic. Magic is the science of love. Magic is the science of love.
And suffering, but I guess, yeah, that would be my question is like, I don't know, I'm just, what's your experience of that? Like of that, when you see the suffering in somebody that they don't even, that they're forgetting, that they're unconscious of or something, but it's almost like the real them is saying, this sucks, help me or something. Like how do you approach those? Have you had crazy experiences or
this might sound really banal, but I think you just love them. Like that's always been my instinct, is to just fully accept and love someone for who they are, right?
Yeah.
Because oftentimes the pain and suffering comes from them not being able to love themselves. And I think that if you love someone, you can show them that they're lovable, and they can learn to love themselves through that experience.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think that's right on the money. And what is it to love someone? That's my
Yeah.
question to you. Like, for me, I always just think it's just being, like it's just like attending and being with them, like really like, love is the acknowledgement of, it's just like the acknowledgement, it's like you are a human, or like,
It's a validation of that person's existence in the world, right? They matter.
Yeah.
Like they matter. Everyone matters, and yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I get accused of being super idealistic all the time, but like I think I mentioned this recently. I watched a conversation or a thing with Father George Calciu, who's gone. He's passed now. He's a saint now, actually, in the Romanian Orthodox tradition. And he was tortured for 21 years in a communist prison in Romania. And at the time of his talk, it was 2006, before he passed away. They asked him, what he thought of the fact that the present government was looking for the names of these people who were involved in all these horrible activities at this prison. And he said, and I guess they were insinuating, are you gonna help them? Are you gonna give the names away, or whatever the case might be? And he said, how do I know that they haven't repented of those things? Right? And that is the kind of love that is required. That you could, and he talked about forgiveness. He talked about the fact that he had forgiven and previously. And he said most of them, he doesn't even remember their names, because he forgave. Not because he never heard their names, but because he forgave, and it was gone. And I think one of the main characteristics of that kind of forgiveness is that you don't remember, right? So what am I trying to say with that? Yeah, I mean, how do you love the man that tortured you into existence? You give yourself away to that person, right? You don't exercise the resentment that you would like to, or the vengeance that you would like to. And you let God deal with it. And, I'm sorry if that sounds, overly saintly or anything. It's not like I'm good at it, but I just think that's the only way to actually make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that resonates really deeply. Yeah. especially as somebody who's done some things in my time, and hopefully repented of them, and yeah, and that
there's another story, Jonathan. There's another story of a saint. I think his name was Dionysus. I always forget his name. Lance knows his name. But I think he was an abbot at a monastery or something to that effect. Anyway, I'm not going to get all the details right, but his brother was murdered, and they were looking for the murderer. And he went into the barn to do his evening chores, and he found a man there hiding, and it was the murderer of his brother. And he gave the man some food and something to drink. He recognized him as the murderer. I guess it was known who murdered his brother. And but he acted as if he didn't know who he was. And then the police came, or the authorities came and asked if he had seen the man, and he said no, he hadn't. Okay, so this is what makes the story even more complicated, because he's a Christian and he lied. Okay. And I think he sent them on the wrong trail. Something like, oh, I think he went, or either he said he didn't see him or he saw him go that way, something like that. And then the man left the next day. And eventually, as the story goes, he came back and repented and became a monk at that monastery. Okay. So, I mean, this is part of the reason why I've decided to do the lives of the saints, because first of all, there's no recipe for these things. There's no, this is how it's done. You lie for the sake of heaven. That's not a rule. You do what God tells you to do. But you can't do that if you're not listening. Right? And then you have the courage to do it, whatever that is. When you start following rules, then you're going to go like Lance said in the last Lives of the Saints, go to your best friend and tell him, because you think you have to confess your sins and make amends. So you show up at your best friend's house and tell him you had an affair with his wife. Oh, how great is that? Right? Not good. Sorry. And that's completely selfish, right? To do such a thing. The thoughts that I had with Saint Dionysus was perhaps his reporting the man would have been giving in to his selfish desire to have vengeance on him. And that was the thing that he was struggling against at that moment, that he had to overcome at that moment, was his own hatred and his own desire to see someone killed, right? Which would be another murder. And so he overcame that, and he granted him, he chose life, right, for that man. But these are all things that God will tell us to do, and the key to them is that we have to be listening and ready to hear that from God. So yeah, I mean, when it comes to seeing somebody suffering, I used to think that if I gave them the answer to their suffering, that they would run after it like I did, which, I personally forgot that it took me like maybe 10 years to find it, or even 10 years to start running, one or the other. I was just as slow as they were, right? To figure it out. And half the time I was driving them further away from their own working out their own salvation, right?
I'm in a bit of a situation like that right now. My best friend is some hard times, and I'm like, watch my YouTube videos. Like, like that's
The answer
exaggerating.
is right here.
Yeah, that's exaggerating, but it's that's how it goes. It's like words, you know, this is read the sentence. It's like, but it's really, if I think there's a sense in which it's still true that if you only could give them what they need, like which is, but not in like a propositional way. It's like it's the if I could give, that loving attention, then
Well, yeah. I mean, it's unconditional.
because if they start doing that, for others, I think that's very helpful as well. When we, somebody who's in suffering, if they start helping other people, that can be very helpful.
Yeah. Well, it's good to remember how stupid you were.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't mean you, I mean me. Like,
Yeah.
when you're judging someone,
Mm-hmm.
which is what you're doing when you're saying, if only they would read my essay,
Yeah.
or only they would watch my video,
Mm-hmm.
But how long did it take you actually to get to the place where you knew what that video was talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, there's gonna be like participatory knowing, and it's like, what the hell does that mean?
You had to get there.
Yeah.
And we all have to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was sitting in on a voice chat this morning in the BOM Discord, and there was a conversation happening there that was just what is it, in contradiction to what we're talking about right now, in my mind. And I mean, I have to be careful about these things because I grew up in a really, really, really judgy family, and it always bothered me. I can remember people visiting, and then as soon as they left, as soon as the door closed behind them, they would, well, she's a bitch. And I'd be like, what? Where did that come from?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
I remember saying to my mother several times,
yeah.
You don't even know her. You just met her. Like, and so it became a very sore spot in me. And I do understand that there's a place to judge, to say, not that person, not a good person, right? But most of the time, people aren't that bad. They're not that dangerous.
Yeah.
They're not that significantly, something to be afraid of, right? And
in fact, the scary people, the ones who the initial appearance is a little off-putting, usually those people have more interesting going stuff on, in my opinion. Like if you take your average person, but then I feel like someone in a prison, for example, would probably be more, I would rather talk with that person, like, even though they might, I don't know if I'm articulating this very well, but like people, yeah, what you just said about,
like I discernment, right? Because like I put myself and my husband actually in a very precarious position once, because I brought someone home from a psych ward.
you told me about this, yeah.
that I thought needed my help, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I was in, first of all, no shape to do such a thing. I personally was like mush. But there was just a very strong sense in me that I had to do it. I had to do it. Well, it wasn't until way later that I found out that this person had been in a forensic psychiatric prison for 8 years because they beat someone within an inch of their lives, their own wife, actually, because they were so mentally ill, right? And the last time I saw that person, they were so angry they were vibrating. And it dawned on me later that, oh, that could have happened to me and my husband. That same thing. It could have been worse, had they had access to a gun or a knife, or, because they had an uncontrollable rage inside of them. I think our guardian angels were working overtime that day, to be honest with you. But ignorance is bliss, right? I didn't know anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I only found out later, and was told by people who knew how actually lucky we were, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't regret what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't just drag him home. I phoned my husband and I asked him if it was okay, and my husband's like, sure. He doesn't. But
yeah, talking about judging people, and
but that's how not judgy I am, okay?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it's not always a good thing.
Yeah.
But I think at the same time, God really honors it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? God really honors it.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine, I don't know how this, for some reason, this story is popping up in my mind, but a friend of mine was almost raped once. She was walking home. She got, grabbed, dragged into some bushes. And this guy was, on top of her. And she had a button that said, Jesus loves you, on her coat. And he saw that button and just ran off. Never finished the job. Right?
Mm.
And she prayed for him. She prays for him still. So, it's like, this takes me back to this whole idea of childlikeness.
No, so let me say one quick thing about judgment, then I want to hear how so, which is the context, which I kind of was trying to bring it up, was that there are certain people who are reflective, such that when you saints or something, we'll judge them quicker or something, because we see our darkness in them, or something, we see our reflection. And
totally.
An example that comes to mind is I hope he'll take this in good spirit. Grimgriz, he has a habit of being, a little bit of a Black Mirror type, kind of, but people might be initially off put, but it's because he is holy in a sense, obviously to a degree, but you know what I mean? It's some people that, I don't know exactly how it fits and stuff, but it's just an interesting thing, because honestly, how it came to mind, and I'm not trying to claim holiness by any means here, which is that as a short guy, people see me and they're like, oh yes, a child, and it's how do I how do I not be phased by that judgment?
Just embrace it, Jonathan.
Or get my binky out. I don't know about that. I think it's just, how do I not how do we not get stuck at the appearances? St. Christopher, we were talking about that.
Tyrell Lannister.
Yeah. 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 So yeah, it's I don't know. That's the thing, when you were talking about judgment being a big theme in your life, that's been a big theme in my life. I had to learn early that judgments are not all they're cracked up to be, and when I feel that nobody sees me, then you inevitably imagine that everyone else also feels like that, which is kind of helpful, because it turns out most people actually don't feel very seen, and
True.
so I don't know. I don't mean to claim any sort of status here, but I definitely feel like as a child, I was more quick to meet people, at a real level, just because of that in some way. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Say it.
Yeah. I think some people are just naturally more empathic too. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's all I can, when I think about growing up in that kind of an environment, I always wondered why I wanted to give people a bigger chance. And honestly, like, the people who were making those kinds of judgments in my family often misjudged people who they thought were good. Like, they just weren't really good at judgment, period. But they did it all the time, And I don't know, maybe they were projecting all their own stuff onto somebody else. Who knows what the reason is? I have no clue, but I never found myself able to do it and feel good about who I was.
Mm-hmm.
I really often just felt like I needed to let that person unfold in whatever way before I could make that call.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this person that I'm talking about who ended up staying with us from the psych ward, I think we got the privilege of seeing a side of him that nobody else ever actually really saw, and it was loving and kind and restrained. And when he left because he had to, because if he didn't, he was probably going to do something terrible, and he wasn't going to do that to us. And that was because we loved him.
Mm-hmm. The lions won't, the lions will be tame in the garden. That's what comes to mind for me, right? So, like, I've had some experiences like that, like when I'm particularly dialed in, like an animal will, like a bird will land on my knee or something. Like I'm no Snow White, but like
I can imagine you singing.
No. But that's an interesting thing how, like, when we are living in the kingdom, or however you want to say it, then
well, I think this is why saints have relationships with animals.
Yeah.
Because they're willing,
and also people, though, like
this gets to the whole piercing thing that you were talking about before. Like, this is making yourself vulnerable, right? Even in your own ignorance. Like, I made myself completely vulnerable to this person that I brought home from the psych ward in total ignorance.
Yeah, because it's not the strength, it's not. Thinking of the force card, I'm going to put it on the screen. It's going to be right here.
Okay.
The force card, it's not the same type of strength of the version that's holding the lion. It's it's a surrendered strength in a way, kind of like that weakness that you, in a way, and yeah, I think that's some good stuff right there. Like, I think that, I don't know.
A power without effort, right? Force subdues the lion, but it's not the means of the force which the lion has, but rather by a legitimized force of the higher order, which simply allows this. For it cannot be the same quantity of forces that which the lion itself has. It has to be a higher quality, right? It can't be the lion has X amount of force, and so to overtake it, we need X amount of force, because that's the same quality of force. It's a force of the below. It has to be a different quality, so we're moving from quantity to quality, okay? And thus, degenerate animality of the below obeys because of that higher quality. The card invokes non-fallen nature, that pre-fall Edenic nature. There's a quality of force which is legitimate. And we see this in many of the saints which have relationships with animals, this saintly force that many of these saints, it's said, when they go back to natural places where they're animals, the bestial, degenerate, primal nature of many animals, which would otherwise attack and be vicious, goes back to that pre-full Edenic state. And you see this in many icons of saints who are talking to bears or at one with animals in this sense. And we could, once again, when we turn back, this is a legitimate energy, and we see this, that the idea of the serpent's energy just isn't legitimate because it comes from a friction and a conflict which is engendered solely in the below.
Yeah, like, it's crazy how people will bloom in front of you,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Beautifully,
Yeah.
like, so beautifully, like, just.
Well, Yeah.
oftentimes there's also like, that loneliness that's never been seen before, like we were saying, but yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit excited right now. I feel like we're really on the pulse. Like,
Yeah.
this is what is important, like in general or something, This,
Yeah.
so, yeah, particularly also that being vulnerable.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the edge of my spiritual development, one might say, where it's like I am, that's where I think I need to attend to more, is like how to actually, I feel like I've spent enough time getting the propositions in order
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
stuff, and I feel like that's been helpful for making me less crazy and stuff, but
Yeah.
I think now it's more, I feel like I need to shift more towards like applying this. Like, I don't know, hopefully maybe even you can feel a little bit of a difference between this is call number 8, where hopefully I'm a little bit more present with you or something, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Totally. I can
because that's what's
totally.
up, that's what's up. We have to be with each other, with people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit excited, but please, whatever is there any?
Well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
What the thought that came up for me was when I was going through some difficulty, I had a really hard time trusting somebody close to me, and I was in therapy. I had a psychologist, a really great psychologist, actually. And he said to me once, he said, "You realize, Shari, that trust has to be given. It can't be earned." And I was like, fuck that. That was my attitude. I was like, no fucking way. This person's going to have to earn it. That's all I can say.
Gotcha. So yeah, I was thinking
I was,
like earning someone else's, but yeah, for
no, no,
you.
no,
Yeah.
no, no. They had to earn it in my books at that
Mhm.
point, right? And the longer I held on to that, the more I realized it was a joke.
Mhm.
How are they going to earn something they don't even know they're working at? They don't even know they're working at it,
Mhm.
right? And I thought, no, I actually have to give it to them. And when I give it to them, they'll earn it.
And they might not even be like trying to. Like
No, they won't try to.
yeah.
It becomes reciprocal, right? It's
No,
a
I'm saying like there might be instances where, you know, yeah, like usually the person who you might be hesitating to
well, just
trust.
think about it in terms of a boss or, boss and an employee. If your boss trusts you with something, you're going to make sure that you get it right because you want to honor that, right? And so you, in a sense, you're earning it, right? You're working towards building the trust.
Mhm.
And yeah, and I mean, I actually thought my psychologist was absolutely wrong about that concept. I thought, no, you're too much of a softie. That's what I thought.
I'm
But
thinking like
the longer that I sat with it, the more I realized that it wasn't him who was a softie, it was me who was hardened and resentful and closed and ossified, right? And I had to break the ice. I had to make the move. I had to give the trust,
Mhm.
And it wasn't easy because that's making yourself vulnerable.
Hmm.
Yeah. But here's the thing. If you think about it in terms of the story of Saint Dionysius and the murderer of his own brother, he actually put himself in a position where if at any given point either one of them realized what was actually happening at that moment. They were both in danger.
What do you mean? Like,
Well, I mean, St. Dionysus, if the murderer realized who he was, he might have killed him. You know? And then, had there been a struggle, St. Dionysus might have killed the other guy. You know, like, it was precarious. That moment of trusting someone to God, actually, it's precarious, right? It's difficult. And it's always going to end up being a matter of life and death, whether it's on a microcosm or a macrocosm, cosmic level, right? To do that. And so, you know, all those wonderful Christian koans come to mind, you know, like lay down your life for a friend, you know, come to mind, right? So you have to be willing to die. You really have to be willing to die.
And that's where the action is, you know, like that's where that's where reality gets exciting, you know?
Yeah.
It's
That's
understandable to like just
Stork and the Dragon, right?
yeah. You know, it's understandable to shrink from it, you know, but at the same time it's like
Well, it's a big ask.
yeah. But the you know, the sparks that fly when stuff like that happens is I think it makes it all, you know, it's
Yeah.
not just chasing the experience, but I think, you know, that's certainly something that's often overlooked is that like the you know, like some would say that like Christ had an erection on the cross. People make a people make a you know obviously oh yeah, people make like biological claims in this respect, you know, and people make more of it than maybe it's meant to be. But you know, it's an interesting thing to me, this the erotic of the self-sacrifice, you know. Yeah. And like to lose
Well, it's full
yourself.
participation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's like in the Golden Key where George, you know, the Tangle stands at the entrance, like, you know, the old man of the earth holds up the door to the river that's flowing, the steaming hot, boiling water of a river that's flowing underground with no air.
What is this from?
The Golden Key.
I'm not
Actually wanted to
familiar.
read an excerpt to you of the Golden Key
Sure.
because you were talking with McMo about shadows. What was that? What did you guys talk about in there? Because it came to my mind while I was listening to your conversation, and I went to the Golden Key, and I was just like, man,
You're talking about shadows?
that's actually why I wrote the comment. I'm thinking about reading the Golden Key on Grail Country.
Let me see if you put a timestamp.
I don't think I put a timestamp. I'm not very good at that.
I can search the transcript real quick. Let me see if I said shadow. The land of the shadows you'd mentioned.
You talked about shadows, I thought.
Oh yeah, shadows being projected on the cave wall.
Yes, that's what it was. The Goethe clip. That's
Yes.
what it was. And let me see. Maybe we could move to that. Do you want to move to that?
Yeah, yeah.
Are you done being pierced?
Yeah. I was just thinking that. I was just yeah.
Or should we do some more?
No. I think we have to come up for air or something of the sort. I don't know. Yeah. Pretty cool thing from that guy Keelan, eh? Or did you know, what are your I don't know, did you have an initial I don't know. I really like that when he was talking about you know, this idea of Goethe's cave. It was
Yeah, well,
resonant
he
with
was,
me.
you know, when I was watching it, I was thinking, this is loving unconditionally again. Okay, this is the delicate empiricism that Goethe's talking about. where you give the thing its existence. You give it to it. And then you stand back and you wonder at it. And in that wonder, that with an O, you come to, well, something is revealed to you. You experience revelation. Okay? That's it. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah.
Right? That's it. So
also there's also a participation aspect though, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, the participation is in giving it its existence. And as soon as you do that, you come into communication with it.
Yeah.
You know? You're allowing it to be who it is.
Yeah. I mean, we can try and run from, the piercing of the heart, but given the fact that it's like the pattern of reality or something like that, I feel like we're gonna have difficulty avoiding it. I'm thinking about
keep circling back.
Yeah, how
it might be fun. It might be fun if I read a chunk of this.
Sure, yeah, please do, yeah.
It's actually, I probably won't read the whole thing because he stops talking about shadows at the very end of the story.
Very good.
But there's let me see if I can find it.
Because I was gonna say there, it's the stepping back. It's the not being a materialist, and it's the letting your heart be pierced or something. And I think the stepping back is the same thing as like not being a definitionalist or something,
You can see it through all the things in the objects, right? But if you don't see it or don't relate to the depth of the object, right, that you can't see, that constitutes the thing, right, then you're going to confuse, then you're not actually going to have a real relationship with the things, right? It's in this right participation, right, that mutual birthing, fractally birthing out of itself thing that goes is the really real.
It's like the
well, like there's this idea of taking yourself out of the first person and putting yourself into the third person and being able to see yourself as something that you could love. Look, for example, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I had this experience when I was in the psych ward, and a nurse said that to me. She said, if you were, would you say the things you're saying to yourself to your friend? That was her question. Who is feeling like you are now? Would you say those things that you say to yourself? I said, of course not. She goes, then why are you saying them to yourself? And for a brief moment, I had an image of myself as my friend. And I'd never known myself as my friend.
Yeah. And that's kind of the idea of making friends with your guardian angel, or like making friends with God.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious to hear about the shadows.
George?
Yes.
Georgie? All right.
Georgie.
I'm trying to see where I should read from. So the grandmother sends Tangle and Mossy out of her house, and she's, well, I won't say who she is. And they're walking, and she tells them that there will come they're supposed to go in a certain direction, and she says there will be a place along the way where you lose each other, but don't panic, right? Just keep going. That's
okay.
And then she says to them, she can't remember the name of the place. She's like, where is that place? Oh, I can't remember the name of it. And which is kind of funny because she's like the all-wise grandmother, and of course she knows the name of it, right? But she's not going to give them a heads up. because they're going to lose each other there. So whatever that place is, it's going to come upon them unbeknownst. She can't tell them what it is, right?
I consent to a demonstration. At the outset, its nature is unclear.
So I'll just read from here. Looking down, they could not tell whether the valley below was a grassy plain or a great still lake. They had never seen any place look like it. The way to it was difficult and dangerous, but down the narrow path they went and reached the bottom in safety. They found it composed of smooth, light-colored sandstone, undulating in parts but mostly level. It was no wonder to them now that they had not been able to tell what it was, for this surface was everywhere crowded with shadows. It was a sea of shadows. The mass was chiefly made up of the shadows of leaves, innumerable, of all lovely and imaginative forms waving to and fro, floating and quivering in the breath of a breeze whose motion was unfelt, whose sound was unheard. No forests clothed the mountainsides, no trees were anywhere to be seen, and yet the shadows of the leaves, branches, and stems of all various trees covered the valley as far as their eyes could reach. They soon spied the shadows of flowers, mingled with those of the leaves, and now and then the shadow of a bird with open beak and throat distended with song. At times would appear the forms of strange, graceful creatures running up and down the shadow bowls and along the branches to disappear into the wind-tossed foliage. As they walked, they waded knee-deep in the lovely lake, for the shadows were not merely lying on the surface of the ground, but heaped up above it like substantial forms of darkness, as if they had been cast upon 1,000 different planes of the air. Tangle and Mossy often lifted their heads and gazed upward to descry whence the shadows came, but they could see nothing more than a bright mist spread above them, higher than the tops of the mountains, which stood clear against it. No forests, no leaves, no birds were visible. After a while they reached more open spaces, where the shadows were thinner, and came even to portions over which shadows only flitted, leaving them clear for such as might follow. Now a wonderful form, half bird-like, half human, would float across the outspread sailing pinions. Anon, an exquisite shadow group of gambolling children would be followed by the loveliest female form, and that again by the grand stride of a titanic shape, each disappearing in the surrounding press of shadowy foliage. Sometimes a profile of unspeakable beauty or grandeur would appear for a moment and vanish. Sometimes they seemed lovers that passed linked arm in arm, sometimes father and son, sometimes brothers in loving contest, sometimes sisters entwined in gracefulest community of complex form. Sometimes wild horses would tear across, free, or bestrode by noble shadows of ruling men. But some of the things which pleased them most they never knew how to describe. About the middle of the plain they sat down to rest, in the heart of a heap of shadows. After sitting for a while, each looking up saw the other in tears. They were each longing after the country whence the shadows fell. "We must find the country from which the shadows come," said Mossy. "We must, dear Mossy," responded Tangle. "What if your golden key should be the key to it?" "Ah, that would be grand," returned Mossy. "But we must rest here for a little while, and then we shall be able to cross the plain before night." So he lay down on the ground, and about him on every side and over his head was the constant play of the wonderful shadows. He could look through them and see the one behind the other, till they mixed in a mass of darkness. Tangle, too, lay admiring and wondering, and longing after the country whence the shadows came. When they were rested, they rose and pursued their journey. How long they were in crossing this plain I cannot tell, but before night Mossy's hair was streaked with gray, and Tangle had got wrinkles on her forehead. As evening drew on, the shadows fell deeper and rose higher. At length they reached a place where they rose above their heads, and made all dark around them. Then they took hold of each other's hand, and walked on in silence and in some dismay. They felt the gathering darkness, and something strangely solemn besides, and the beauty of the shadows ceased to delight them. All at once Tangle found that she had not a hold of Mossy's hand, though when she lost it, she could not tell. That's all I'm reading.
Oh, you're leaving us at the cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Thanks for reading that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like
yeah.
it's a crazy good story. I might just read it on Girl Country. It's long. It's a long read, but I want people to hear it badly.
Sure. Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about it really? Obviously, it's very, I can see why it came to mind we're talking about.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
is there anything like particular about it that you're thinking to say here?
Well, I've always just read it and let it and not tried to understand it because the way that George MacDonald's stories have worked on me in the past is that something will actually happen to me and I'll remember it and then it'll become meaningful, right? To me. So I don't really know. I mean, it came to mind because he was talking about Plato's cave. I think George.
Sorry.
Huh?
I was gonna say, and you also know, like, what comes next in the story and stuff. So it's kind of.
Well, I do, but I still don't know what the shadows. I still couldn't give you a definition of the shadows. I could tell you how I feel about the shadows, but it wouldn't really make much sense because I don't propositionally want to articulate it.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
No, I'm with you. Yeah.
And but I do know that, like Tangle and Mossy in the story, the more I read that story, the more I wanted to cry. And I didn't know why.
I think it's because
Right?
it reflects something very, I don't know, like
Very deeply human.
yeah, just like losing your friend in a world of illusions or something, and obviously more than that, but that's what really was pulling on my heartstrings.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And well, the killer for me is that she doesn't remember when it happened. And I mean, just in my own personal life, that happened in my marriage at one point where we lost each other, in a world of shadows, and really couldn't point to when it actually happened. So the first time I read that story, man, I couldn't even get through it because of that, But that's not all he's talking about. He's talking about a lot of things when he talks about it. And the other thing about George MacDonald's shadows, just as, which leaves him beautifully mysterious and fractal, just like the faceless dancers, is that the shadows are also something very beautiful. They're not just terrifying. And so he breaks the frame, for me anyway, of thinking of a shadow as something terrible.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's an interesting. I have my intellectual bits are, my gears are spinning here. Like in addition to this, the resonance of my heartstrings or whatever, my brain was looking for holes or whatever you want to say. And, one thing that I'm thinking about is like how it's interesting comparing it to like Plato's cave where, the shadows, it's all bullshit and we just want to get away, but the beauty of the shadows, it's very interesting. But then
Well, they're drawing them.
Yeah.
The shadows draw Tangle and Mossy. They end up crying because they want to be in the land where they come from.
That's it. That's the other thing.
And so it's like he flips Plato's cave, right? In a way.
Yeah. that's the thing that was really sticking in my mind, was that, you know, the longing for the heavenly realm, let's say, I think that's fine, you know. However, only if we remember that it's not somewhere else. You know, it's like
Mm.
the idea that with like a Goethe's cave, how Keelan was describing, obviously it's hard to get a perfect analogy, you know, but something about how the objects that you can't see are actually there in the things you can see, you know, and they're not out of the cave, they're here. It's just because of how things are, you can't that's a simplistic way to put it, but you know, just it's not, you can't see them directly, but you know, it's like the world that the shadows that the shadows were being cast from, um I think is the same worlds in which the shadows appear in some way. The beauty of the shadows, I think that's really the thing about Keelan's way of putting it, which was really compelling to me, such that um, you know, like to see your guardian angel, if you know, if we're using this terminology, which I do find helpful, you know, it's to see you more deeply or something, you know, rather than like see some abstract version of you that's not here or something, you know. Yeah. Yeah. And it's and also the idea that like maybe there is something to be said for like getting lost in the Shadowland for a while or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
What exactly is it that compels the dreamer? What exactly is the dreamer reaching for, which not only necessitates, but actually demands pain, fear, uncertainty, and forgetting? It would seem that within us there is a kind of primordial will. But through Watt's narrative, we can see that this fundamental will has a very specific kind of structure. It is a will unto experience.
He says that the Godhead, he doesn't even call it a god in a personal sense, has given itself over to hazard and risk, the process of becoming.
It's infinity collapsing on itself to give the appearance of finitude. It's all divine play, and
That's a fun little game, though, right? Because the
It is.
remembering's so nice. The remembering is so good.
Maybe there is something to be said for like getting lost in the Shadowland for a while or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it just dawned on me too that isn't that what Lewis called the book about, or that movie about Lewis was after his wife died, was called Shadowlands?
I'm not familiar.
Another dispatch from Mrs. Gresham. See, her letters are rather unusual. She writes as if she knows me somehow.
Anybody here called Lewis?
Savoy Pictures is proud to present one of the most extraordinary love stories of our time. Anthony Hopkins' Shadowlands, based on a true story.
C.S. Lewis, yeah, with Anthony Hopkins. Oh, interesting. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say about the shadows.
Okay.
I just like one of the things I came to realize about his use of shadow in Phantastes, for example, because the shadow there is malevolent in the sense that it disenchants the world. Well, anything that it falls across just becomes a plain old materialistic thing, you know? And one of the insights I got thinking about that was that when the sun shines on, let's say, a tree, the tree casts a shadow. But the tree is a material thing, right? And so when materiality, let's say, blocks the light, then that material thing casts a shadow. And I think that that's what George MacDonald is talking about in Phantastes, when the shadow disenchants things.
It's that when we see, you know, when things are
well, they become
understood as material only or something.
Yeah, they become flat and one-dimensional, right?
Mhm.
They're no longer
And that shadow
incarnate.
just makes
They're not
everything.
incarnate is
Yeah.
really, you know.
And
And
that
I
version
think
of the shadow just makes everything suck. Yeah.
right, but I think that, you know, and I'm just thinking about it right now, like I'll have to think about it more, but somehow I like to leave the golden key alone. It seems too precious to fiddle with too much, but somehow that same principle applies in the golden key, except that the material is the real. The real world, right, is like they're living in the land of the shadows. So the forest is a forest of shadows. And what's casting its shadow onto the earth is heaven, is the real, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and that would actually jive. I mean, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but I think that would actually really jive with his whole philosophy of creation being a reflection of who God is. So something like that.
Yeah, no, I think I'm like you know, it's very numinous to me. I think it's like I think this is some super deep stuff. So I don't expect us to like hammer it all out, you know, and have it nice and good to go or whatever. But two things in particular come to mind though, which one, I'm gonna share my screen again real quick, if you don't mind, which is if you notice, when I posted our conversation where we talked about this type of thing, iconic vision and alignment,
Yeah.
in the Grand Trine, I put this one in between.
Right.
I'm not sure if you noticed.
I don't think I saw that one actually.
Oh,
Maybe I did.
I think
Maybe
I think it would be good to play. I think it's very fitting. Let me
yeah.
let me make sure my audio.
Well, it's theory of color from Goethe. Yeah.
Yes.
Which
I
also,
believe you. I'm pretty sure you sent me this one, so you've probably already seen it, but
okay.
I'm not sure. I think you sent me something about his color theory, but then I found
Yeah.
this one.
Okay.
All right.
This simpler setup helps to show what really happens. We illuminate a cone, from the left at first with white light, then from the right with white light. There is now a grey shadow on each side of the cone. If we add a green filter to the left-hand lamp, the whole setup is bathed in green light, except for the part that is in the shade of the cone. This time, when we switch on the light on the right, which is still white, our vision creates a magenta shade where there is room for it, namely in the grey shadow. If we zoom in until we can't see the surroundings anymore, but only the shadow itself, it stops looking magenta and turns grey again. If we view the shadow in isolation, it is grey. But when we see it in the context of which it is part, our vision invokes a magenta shade. Magenta is green's complementary color.
Yeah.
The German poet and scientist Johann Wolfgang von Goethe noticed the colored shadows and decided to invest.
Now, I've got a quest for you, Shari. Can you imagine what I might have thought of when looking at this? I don't mean to be so smug, but I put it right next to you because I'm talking. We have this as well, right?
Right. The Grand Trine. Yeah.
Yeah, which is Jupiter. The same thing, 27 degrees, or at least in terms of the colors.
Yeah.
The red and the green, and with Yaldabaoth and Lucifer, and a big part of Galahad's cosmology as well, is he said, "To thy people cometh sight, for from thy shadow shineth light," which is that in the shadows that we see, what one aspect of what gives them the character that we encounter is the fact that they are contextualized by our unconscious mind, such that if I'm driving through a town and my car is low on gas, I'll see the gas stations, before I'll see the grocery stores. Or if I have repressed my aggression, and then an MMA fighter walks in, that's going to color the way I see him. The shadows on the wall will appear differently. And I think that's a crucial insight insofar as it reconnects us with the world in some way, in terms of like the re-enchants things and stuff.
Our past experiences aggregate and swell into complex narratives, and those narratives contextualize our future experiences. The world you perceive is not the one which is really there, but rather your own narrative reflected within it. In other words, life is a kind of feedback loop, in which the things that happen to you shape the things that can happen to you. And who knows to what extent this is the case. We live inside of a collective narrative, which to a large extent controls context. This contextual monopoly may not only control what we think, but even how we think. And to that extent, it controls how we perceive. And to that extent, it controls what we perceive. And as long as it does, it determines what we are and what is possible. When he is asleep, he summons the devil. But when he awakens, he is Christ. My poem, Reflection in the Grail, was conceived as an invocation to awaken this sleeping god. Its 3 concluding lines are directed at the reader, who is called on to perceive his or her own reflection in the world. This is why I have said that my cosmogram is a mirror.
But yeah, I think there's a whole lot going on in terms of this idea of like colored shadows, in terms of, the shadows are the way I kind of thought about the triangle there. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the thing that Goethe got out of that too was that there was a principle of cooperation between the color and the eye, right?
Yeah.
Like that they actually were cooperating with each other. They weren't just, so there was a relationship there, which made, I wrote a poem when I was looking into this stuff. I wrote a poem kind of not about color, but just the idea of participation in what you're looking in, in what you're looking at, like with the eye. Here, I think I've read this before, but they block my path on the way to the outhouse. Each head bobs precariously on bowed backs, smiling bright and eternally optimistic. I don't know their names, but they are everywhere. These stretch ever more tenuously across my path, asking to be seen. But what is my eye to them? Must it fall like the sun across their faces? A less glorious, but still luminous orb? It seems to be so. And it's called Yellow Flowers.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. The idea of the eye being analogous to the sun reminds me of the galactic center with the
Yeah.
Also
and then at the bottom I wrote, the participative anthropic principle, the observers are necessary for the universe to be born.
Yeah, and this and he, with the green and the red, also thinking about determinism and the participatory and like a balance. It's I think there's super deep stuff going on. I had some the one other thing, an interesting thing about the galactic center. I'm not sure if you saw the video I made about the luminous Holy Trinity.
I did.
In that one, it was briefly mentioned that
the black perfection referred to in the Hermit. I don't know how this is connected to the great central sun.
Steiner and the folk in that whole sphere, they would talk about something called the Grand Central Sun.
This is the divine heart at the center of our galaxy from which everything has been born. And we could say it's the presence of the Creator in the heart of our galaxy. And in the heart of all galaxies, the Creator is mystically present at the galactic center of every single galaxy. And in our galaxy, the Creator has empowered the divine Son, Christ, to proceed from this divine heart, the central sun, and in a long process of incarnation to descend in stages down to incarnate eventually in the human being, Jesus of Nazareth. We can speak of an incarnation of Christ coming from the central sun.
And they didn't know about galaxies at the time and stuff, you know?
Before our spirit nature was taken hold of by our human nature, it was a pure spiritual being, and formed a part of what is present as the central sun, S-U-N, as the spiritual light of the world. We rested as spiritual beings in the Logos, as the first sparks in the flame of the central light. What descended into the physical human being was not yet what we find in the human being today.
And basically that's just another, you know, I think there's a mapping there in terms of where Steiner might have been kind of having some sort of presentiment about like this reality or something. I don't know. Yeah. And that was really it. I didn't have any really like thing to say about that. I just kind of wanted to inform you that you know, I haven't done much digging into what precisely they meant by that for some reason. But yeah, I feel like I definitely will do that at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've just dipped my toe into Goethe's theory of color. So many things to learn and not enough time to do it all.
Mm-hmm. You might like that guy who did the Goethe's cave thing. He just did this video. He's really engaging deeply with Goethe's way. Stuff like his channel image
Oh, that's
here.
cool. I should look at that. Yeah.
You can see his colors.
Color.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also they map to the planets, and he's really thinking about this, like, you know, he's taking this very sincerely or in terms of the color wheel and stuff. And
Is
he
he fairly new or?
yeah, he's you know, like about a year old, and he's been blown up.
Okay.
I think rightfully so.
Can you go back to the beginning of his videos again? I just saw something I recognized.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's the Hopi hands. Okay. Yeah.
And in his recent one here, he really delved into the
reality
really
of the
delved into the color wheel really in depth.
Oh, cool. I'll have to watch it.
Let me see where he really gets to the part that I'm thinking of right here. And he connects it to musical scales as well.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
That would over.
And this video is called An Animistic Cosmology for an Impending Epoch. Yeah.
Oh, definitely watching it.
Yeah.
That was good.
Would recommend for sure.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that I'll see conversations between like him and Griffin at some point and stuff like that, or you know, because I think he's one of the, like, you know, in terms of like YouTubers who I really have a lot of respect for and also think that they're doing important stuff. He's definitely, you know, Griffin and Peugeot is probably up there. I don't know. And Formscapes and
And then there was a Festschrift.
The Logos Pyramid.
The Logos Pyramid.
Yes, the Logos Pyramid.
We participate in it.
For regeneration, where would you put some energy? Go ahead.
Grail Country is a legendary channel. Like, can we just take a moment to acknowledge this? Like, so cool, you know?
Well, I think that ties into like what a resurrection body is, Nate.
Right.
So I think that these are bodies, you know, so there's always that debate in the New Testament. Welcome to the fringe, Matt. Yeah, I think that like.
Okay, let me ask you this. Is it, would it be proper to say that
it's so cool that I think it's really admirable that Nate just kind of doesn't really care what happens on his channel, but also obviously he does, but you know, it's like,
well, Nate's kind of like, you know, everybody says PVK is the center of this little corner. Nate is the center of Grail Country because it's Nate's spirit that exists there, to be honest. I don't know if I personally just alone would have ever had the courage to do that. What he's done, but it's provided me a space to be more courageous. I'm courageous all by myself, but I'm not necessarily courageous out there in public, you know? So, and I'm glad that Nate created that space for myself, at least.
That created this space.
100%. Yeah. And then, you know, that's just the live section. And then you have like, you know, like these conversations between him and, you know, people who are like in academia or who are more specialized in something. It's
the first temple mystical traditions of Judaism, which later reemerge as Kabbalah.
I think it's a great channel. Good job, Nate.
Yeah, it is great.
Good going. And and that reminds me that I'm still hoping to have I would still love to like talk with you and the meditations gang about Steiner and stuff, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just reach out to Nate. I think he's pretty busy till probably fall because we've got that conference coming up.
Yeah.
So Nate's doing everything. I'm not doing a thing. I don't even know why my name's on there, you know. But yeah, so yeah, he's busy.
That's so exciting. I want to go. You know, I want to go, but I don't know if I think it's probably not going to happen. But I don't know. How much is it? Like a ticket price and
yeah, there's a ticket price. I don't know what it is though. I can send you the link for the website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially, I felt like you guys were like baiting me with titling it as you did. It's like, yeah.
Face to face?
Yeah, I was like, man, I have to go. What the heck?
Well, it covers all the bases. You know, it's an actual face to face. It'll be the first time for me even meeting Nate.
So exciting. I'm so excited.
I've never met Nate. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So
I'm so excited for you, you know, like.
And everybody else. Haven't met anyone except I've met Jacob. And then I met one other guy from the Bridges of Meaning Discord server who's not very active there anymore. But he got me in touch with the priest that brought me in as a catechumen into the Orthodox Church.
Gotcha.
And I went to that church and was able to meet him in person too. So I've only met 2 online friends in person in 6 years.
Yeah, I've known that. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
But I mean, I live at the end of the earth. So, you know, it's not that easy.
I think it's going to be good. And I'm excited for you. And yeah, I haven't met anyone either. You know, like you said, you met a couple, but I haven't met anyone. And not to compare, of course, but I'm reminded that there's a estuary group in my hometown that I haven't gone to. Yeah.
Are they people from?
You know, I should have gone. Yes. Sorry.
Are they people from this little corner, or are they?
I don't know if there's anyone that like I know by name.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just been it's a combination of me forgetting and just me kind of being a little hesitant for some reason. But yeah, I feel like, you know, yeah, I'll spare you the rant about, you know, how important I think this is about meeting people in person, you know, fellowship, communion, friendship, intimacy, eye contact, vulnerability, bodies of people, and face to face, and not fucking text, you know?
Yeah. Dude, you want to talk about Luciferic tech?
Yeah.
Okay. That is.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is important.
And I'm thinking I'll probably check out that Shari at some point. See what's going on there.
Put it in your Google Calendar.
Yeah.
And set a reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My hometown. How crazy is that?
Yeah, that's pretty good. You're lucky.
Mm.
You're lucky. It's funny because my neighbor started I would call it an estuary, but she's not part of this community. She's Baha'i, or I actually don't know if she still is. Her and her husband have been Baha'i for
What's Baha'i?
long. Baha'i?
Yeah.
What is Baha'i? Let me see.
I don't think I've ever even heard that word.
Oh, really?
No.
It's a fairly newer religion. I think they both grew up Christian, but they didn't have a very, I don't know, they just...
So it's like not a... Is it like a... like New Agey type of thing, or like a Eastern-y type of thing, or...
So Baha'i is founded in the 19th century. Waiting. And teaches the essential worth of all religion and the unity of all people. Established by Baha'u'llah, it initially developed in Iran and parts of the Middle East, where it has faced ongoing persecution. And it's estimated to have 5 to 8 million adherents.
Wow.
So, yeah. So some things happened during COVID that I think just gave my neighbor pause about the Baha'i faith, and her husband as well. And then, anyway, I remember maybe about a year ago, she told me that they were meeting with a Muslim, a Christian, a Buddhist, an atheist, and then themselves. They were just... These were people that they ended up getting to know for some reason, like not through any organization. And they decided to just sit down with each other and talk, ask questions.
Yeah. Sounds like
I don't know where she's at with it. She's a very hard person to get together with. She's got a very, very busy life. So, but yeah.
I've been struck by your mention of all that. What was in particular that you said? Your mention of all that reminds me of something that oh yes, the one world religion. And what are your thoughts about this? You know, like we've got the idea that...
I don't like it.
Yeah, no, yeah.
That's my first thought.
Yeah, no, well, saying it the way I said it, like, I mean, I only use that term because that's the way I phrase the bad version.
Oh, yeah,
One world
okay.
religion, that's...
Yeah.
I think that's part of like that's part of the globalist agenda, like or whatever you want to say. However, I also think, as equally strongly as I think that, which I really think that, you know, like the Antichrist is trying to make a new religion, basically, you know, and I equally think that Tomberg and Steiner were correct in saying that there will be a synthesis of some sort.
Oriental mysticism thus unites with the Christian knowledge of the West to form a beautiful unity.
And that these paths are not so different as we like to suspect.
So the Tao is being the truth, the logos, and the way became flesh.
And that maybe even, I might even go so far as to say the Maitreya Buddha will show up in a couple thousand years, I don't know.
The Maitreya Buddha will appear 3,000 years after our time and will be able to teach people about the Christ impulse. He will speak in a language that must first be created.
That's a little far out, but, and to be perfectly frank, I actually think, I consider Galahad's work something of a revelation, and I think that it quite well bridges the gaps, but I'm also concerned about the one world government and one world religion, but, my heart is hopeful about some sort of positive synthesis, and I really think, Galahad's cosmology in terms of the dream of life being this fitting with the
Leela in Hinduism, the creative play of the divine absolute.
Kabbalistic idea of Tsitsum, insofar as Abraxas is the dreaming humanity who has to wake up to his true nature like Christ did, or something like that. I'm simplifying it a bit, and then also the idea of he's got the Taijitu at the bottom, the yin and yang, and the
Well, I can tell you, I just read a paper yesterday that the Antichrist is working on the same project.
Yeah, well, that's why I bring it up, because I see both. I see both things. I'm trying to discern. I'm not trying to make any claims about. I'm not trying to make any claims about Galahad right now. All I'm saying is, how do we make sure that we, what's up with the one world religion, and how do we, but also how do we not forget about maybe something of a correct one world religion in some sense, which would be Christian, but also, perhaps a more open idea of Christianity or something like that.
A broad-hearted and open Christianity.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I'll send you this. It's on the Club of Rome's website.
I've only heard minimally about that. That's like a secret society, right?
I don't know much about it either.
Okay.
It's a part of the Earth for All project. And it's the name of the paper is The System Within, Addressing the Inner Dimensions of Sustainability and Systems Transformation. And one of the co-authors is a woman named Phoebe Tickell, and I've seen her in conversation with Ian McGilchrist, actually. And she's doing a lot of work on what they call moral imagination.
We have to know that there are people who have differing angles on this and they can contribute something. And so the work you're doing, which is to liberate people's imaginations from whatever it is that they're constantly being told they have to believe, is wonderful, because it will bring different facets of truth to light.
Thank you. I mean, a really important part of the work is also the connection to what matters, this moral imagination. The way I see that is that rather than following moral laws and rules that can actually be, massively manipulated, religion, can be wonderful. It can also be very harmful.
Absolutely.
You're looking to kind of top down morality, and morality has become a really dirty word, but a lot of people have raised their eyebrows at the name of moral imaginations and what we're doing, and yet we're trying to reclaim that and say, actually, what everybody needs is to kind of build a muscle of moral imagination and metaphor, and the ability to really connect with what matters and is beautiful and good and true, and not wait to be told that, or to follow rules, or to try and work out what the right law or rule or principle is, but to get this kind of coming alive through the imagination, through the kind of faculties that we're talking about, the kind of right hemispheric, intuitive, imaginative, capacities to develop that compass of what is right and wrong, and what are we not going to let happen. Does that make sense? There's a kind of, what I'm trying to do is knit them together.
I love that. And I think you ought to wear the superciliousness of these people who raise an eyebrow when you talk about morality as a badge of pride. It shows that you're really onto something important. Because nowadays, everything that's really important is being attacked and destroyed, because it demands of us some degree of self-restraint. It demands that we are aware of the limitations and boundaries in things. We can't just have everything we want and have it now. We need actually to exercise some virtuous restraint on how we behave and how we think, and without it we're utterly lost. And it comes from an intuitive level. What really interests me is that there's a couple of cases I refer to in the book in which scientists who are completely convinced, of course, that human beings are naturally
competitive, self-interested,
competitive and self-interested, egotistical, and so on, set up experiments to show this, and were honest enough to report that the answer showed the exact opposite, that people are normally, naturally, and you see this in children, but they don't have to be taught it, unless there's something very wrong with them, I know, but generally speaking, you see this, that they love to help one another. They love to be cooperative. We are naturally generous, and it's further thinking and ratiocination that leads us to be greedy and self-seeking and speak for our own interests rather than others. So, once again, it's a case of there not being a predicament. How on earth do we reverse the way we are? However do we, it's actually there. It's all there ready if we can just tear down the edifice that's been built in front of it, if you see what I mean.
Completely. And the systemic, we haven't really talked much about, the systemic forces that keep us into, that really encouraged the kind of qualities you're talking about.
Let's do so.
What's
capitalism?
Capitalism. I didn't see capitalism mentioned so much explicitly in your book, but I'd be really curious to hear, where the place for the kind of systemic critique of where we find ourselves is.
Well, I suppose the thing about capitalism,
moral imagination. So in order to steer the Titanic away from the iceberg, because it's such a slow moving and hard to wield bulk of a thing, you have to start with the inner system within, right? Spiritual and imaginal. And I thought, oh, isn't this interesting? Do I want to look into this dark pool? Not sure.
Yeah.
Because it's going to give me personally, I did read it. But it's going to give me pause. Which I really feel like I'm gathering some kind of momentum, but it feels to me like, okay, well, this is always the situation. It's two sides of the coin, right? Christ and Antichrist. And so, and George MacDonald tackles this in his imagination essay when he talks about fancy and imagination. And I guess for myself, and this is all fresh in my mind at the moment, but what I want to do is see where the difference lies.
Between
between let's say the Christ and the Antichrist in this area, right?
Yeah.
Of the imaginal and the imagination, and yeah, because essentially what they're proposing is that in order to change the human being, you have to change the value system, which means you have to change the religion, right? And morality. And so, and I just don't know how changeable those things are, because I mean, for people like this, it's all just social construct.
Yeah, morality is based on the laws of reality. It's like reality works a certain way, and that's how
That's
we
what I
get.
think.
Yeah,
That's what I think.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
And there's also the transhumanist aspect, and
Yeah.
but
Well, they want to essentially, they, gone totally simplified. They want to make you care about the things that they care about. Right. And they want you to blindly believe whatever it is that they say, which then makes me ask the question, how much do I blindly just believe the things that I think I believe? Like, how much of that is allowed, and how much, like, there's just a lot of questions now in my mind.
Yeah.
Because of that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too, because I generally, like, when you mentioned first watching Galahad's video, and like this guy had an experience and he was struck, like that was like I had an immediate resonance, or like I felt that I had been to the place where he was speaking from, like, and despite even like it wasn't even necessarily so much the words, but like it was the words, but I could feel that I really felt that there was an honesty in him or something like that, and that's still my general impression, but I think it's only wise to like be, I don't know, it's like, I feel like I
Well,
should
I'm
just
not.
stop speaking here, but also,
Yeah. I'm not casting any shade on anybody else's experience, but actually, if I'm wrong, I need to know, but I can only know, like, not wrong, because that's even not a great choice of words. If I'm like, every cell has a wall. Let's say that. Every cell has a cell wall. Every body has skin. There's boundaries, right? And yeah, I haven't really thought about this hard enough to articulate it, but I guess, just moving out of my own feelings, I feel like I don't want to cross-pollinate with the Antichrist, any of my ideas,
neither do I, and that's
so I just want to really self-examine and examine things that I'm thinking about. Hard, let's say, a little harder, maybe.
Saturn retrograde being internal, more reflective, reviewing, contemplative. What did I learn here? What am I spiritually advancing? What am I understanding is karmically closing for me?
Yeah. To be clear, I don't think that, at least not right now, I don't think that Griffin is the Antichrist. And I don't think that his system is, and I don't think that his synthesis of East and West, I see that more as what Steiner was, I see that as him continuing the tradition of Tomberg in a way, maybe even unintentionally. And more than like this globalist AI God, save the planet. Like, I have lots of love for the planet. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I love nature, but it's this whole, eco religion.
Yeah.
I think the Galahad's in the clear generally. But it's just, it's this type of, it's. I feel like we gotta. I guess that's really just the point. Which is that I'm saying, all that stuff, the globalism and stuff is not. There is perhaps a flip side of this, which looks similar, but is not the same,
There is, right? Like, it's light and dark. Like, There is, and it's complicated. So I don't know. I just think Jesus says, be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove, right? And my biggest concern is not being harmless. That's the thing. I don't want to harm anyone. So that's what I want to be careful about.
That reminds me of we were talking about piercing of the heart and perceiving other people's suffering, such that I think when I was talking about kind of what I'm trying to work on, or what I feel is relevant to me to focus on, that's similar to what you just said, in that I don't want to hurt anyone. And I feel like sometimes when you see someone suffering and they're not ready to deal with it, you have to be very virtuous to like be in that situation, and for me at the beginning it was like I couldn't help but see it, and I was running around causing chaos, and I feel bad for some of that, hopefully it's understandable, but it's like that's a struggle for me, being honest, is how do I, it's kind of like the valve on how much I let myself see people and how much I do what I do.
Yeah. And it's not easy that's the hard part about seeing, right? It's not easy to be able to see, and because
every angel is terrifying.
For you it's obvious, for others it's not, and when you state the obvious, you get all kinds of strange reactions. All kinds of strange reactions.
And you don't even have to say anything if you just glance in the right way,
That too. I know it's difficult. It can be really difficult. And yeah. Friend of mine said to me once, much wisdom brings much sorrow, right, Shari? I said, yeah.
Who I, not that I know. Nothing of a wise man. I'm
I don't think you're not wise, though. I think the part about being young, because I could see myself in some of the scenarios that you're talking about when I was younger, is like Rilke talks about it, don't terrify people with your joy, right? How does he put it? It's so good.
When you get that spark and you want to make the song, like we have to, this is what I'm talking about. That seems like a good place to maybe
maybe we can land it.
Yeah.
I gotta go make some pickled beets. Rilke, let's see, where are you, Rilke? So he says, here.
That's the other thing, actually, saying that I was kind of jokingly fishing for a compliment there, talking about wisdom, just out of, say, I don't think I'm hot shit, but upon saying that, I'm reminded how that's actually another thing that happens too, is that people will project this saintliness onto you. That's a challenging thing too. I'm sure you've been through that.
Also not, well, Nate called me that once on a live stream, and I got frantic in my mind because I'm just like, don't do that, right? All right. So it says here, therefore, dear sir, love your solitude and try to sing out with the pain it causes you. For those who are near you are far away, and this shows that the space around you is beginning to grow vast. Be happy about your growth, in which, of course, you can't take anyone with you, and be gentle with those who stay behind. Be confident and calm in front of them, and don't torment them with your doubts, and don't frighten them with your faith or joy, which they wouldn't be able to comprehend. Seek out some simple and true feeling of what you have in common with them, which doesn't necessarily have to alter when you yourself change again and again. When you see them, love life in a form that is not your own, and be indulgent towards those who are growing old, who are afraid of the aloneness that you trust. And don't expect any understanding, but believe in a love that is being stored up for you like an inheritance, and have faith that in this love there is a strength and a blessing so large that you can travel as far as you wish without having to step outside it. It seems to me that almost all our sadnesses are moments of tension, which we feel as paralysis because we no longer hear our astonished emotions living, because we are alone with the unfamiliar presence that has entered us, because everything we trust and are used to is for a moment taken away from us, because we stand in the midst of a transition where we cannot remain standing. That is why the sadness passes. The new presence inside us, the presence that has been added, has entered our heart, has gone into its innermost chamber, and is no longer even there. It's already in our bloodstream. And we don't know what it was. We could easily be made to believe that nothing happened, and yet we have changed, as a house that a guest has entered changes. We can't say who has come, perhaps we will never know, but many signs indicate that the future enters us in this way, in order to be transformed in us long before it happens. And that is why it is so important to be solitary and attentive when one is sad, because the seemingly uneventful and motionless moment when our future steps into us is so much closer to life than that other loud and accidental point of time when it happens to us as from outside. The quieter we are, the more patient and open we are in our sadnesses, the more deeply and serenely the new presence can enter us, and the more we can make it our own, the more it becomes our fate. He has this really great poem at the end here. Extinguish my eyes, I'll go on seeing you. Seal my ears, I'll go on hearing you. And without feet I can make my way to you. Without a mouth I can swear your name. Break off my arms, I'll take hold of you, with my heart as with a hand. Stop my heart and my brain will start to beat. And if you consume my brain with fire, I'll feel you burn in every drop of my blood. Yeah, so there you go. You can end on that note, right?
Yeah.
It's a good one to end on.
Yeah. Indeed.
What are you thinking?
I don't know. I'm thinking about, well, right now I'm thinking about my face, but
the face is the portrait of the mind and the eyes its informer. So Da Vinci in this drawing has revealed the role of the eyes, which is to show us the whole mind. The most common saying of this kind is, the eyes are the windows to the soul.
But also thinking about how that fits with this idea of like the Eschaton and the constellation in terms of like teleological objects being metatemporal and like Galahad has this idea of watchtowers, where we are like watchtowers, and the teleological object comes over, it sends down a message, and that's kind of the type of imagery I was feeling when you were saying about how like something from the future is arriving,
entering us,
yeah,
transforming us.
And
Yeah,
also, of
totally.
course, I couldn't help but think about the reappearance of Christ in the Etheric. Like this is
Yeah, I was thinking about guardian angels when the future enters us and transforms us, all that, So yeah, Rilke was in it. He was
Yeah, no,
totally
that
in
was
it.
a good one. I'm definitely gonna have to listen to that. I'm excited to listen to that again. I really appreciate your readings, especially today. I thought they were really on point, like in terms of poignancy and stuff. So
Yeah.
this was great.
Yeah, it was really good. I enjoyed it too, Jonathan.
Cool. I look for I'm thinking about how this is number 8. We've got a number of them going here.
That's cool. It's awesome.
Yeah, I've been loving it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I mean, we didn't hit all the things in the outline.
Yeah, that's true.
We missed the divine spark and the psychology of animals. The psychology of animals was so. Did you listen to it?
Yeah, I did. I listened to that. Yeah, maybe that's one thing. Just real quick to end on is that I was gonna say I forgot to say something about this, which I wanted to. This is kind of you have to trust me or believe me. Depends on how much you believe me and trust me and stuff. But and I'm there's people who might not. But this I was gonna add a snake going up this,
Right.
But I didn't because I was kind of scared. I think that's what I'm going with.
Originally, you were gonna
originally when I was doing it, I was like, that was the next step, but I stopped there because it was like, all right, this is like a little beyond.
So that must have been helpful to you watching the psychology of animals then.
Yeah, that's one thing that
because
was
the snake has two. It has two meanings.
Yeah. Yes, and that's
I was all over. I was listening to that carefully too because I had 2 dreams in my life that featured snakes. One was when I was quite young, and it was a repetitive dream. I used to dream it all the time, where I would be in a field full of rocks, and the rocks were all like this big. They were not huge, and they were white rocks, and I would flip them over, and a snake would come out and bite my ankle, and I could feel the fangs going in and the poison going in, and it was really painful. But I just kept flipping over the rocks. I never stopped.
Just because you were like curious what was under there, or?
It was my curiosity. And I never understood the dream. Okay. And then I had another one with a snake in it where some men, and they were all dressed in black, put this massively huge serpent, like 2 stories long, high or whatever, serpent into a building to kill the 2 witnesses. This was in my dream. There were 2 witnesses in the building, and they put this serpent in there, this black, huge snake, and it was just going like this, looking, and it found them and devoured them. And I don't know what that means.
What do you mean by witnesses?
That's how that was their description in my dream. The 2 witnesses. Of course, I thought of the 2 witnesses from Revelation, but I don't know if that's what it's talking about.
I'm not familiar with this.
I'm
not familiar.
Yeah, in Revelation,
Or at
there's
least I
2.
don't remember because I have read Revelation, but I don't remember.
Yeah, there are 2 witnesses in Revelation who are martyred. And but I don't know if that's coinciding to my dream, actually. It could be something completely different.
End Time Bible prophecy reveals that 2 individuals, called the 2 witnesses, will proclaim God's message and work great miracles in the days ahead of us. God will give them power and special instructions in preparation for Jesus' return.
So, yeah, anyway, it's funny because both these dreams, one was a long, long time ago. I was like, I think it was in grade 4. I had that dream till I was in grade 6 or something. And then the other one was maybe 2 years ago or something, or a year ago. And I really don't know what they mean.
No, I'll probably think about it. I'll probably
So
think.
I was curious. I was really interested in the snake part of that video too, actually.
Yeah. And also, he was talking about, part of the reason I also hesitated to edit, not just of being intimidated by the, invoking of this symbol, but also like, I didn't know, part of me wanted to put it around the base as well, rather than going up the thing.
Right.
And, then I didn't make it. So again, it's kind of going off my word, but then when I saw Galahad's thing, I was like, yes, this is another overlap, even though there's no evidence or whatever. And then, and now I keep thinking about how Nate is either planning or wanting to, I think they have plans, I'm not sure, to talk with Peugeot about precisely that, about like the difference, I guess, or maybe how they're connected, or maybe this between the Caduceus style,
Right. Yeah.
based on the
That was, yeah. I wonder if
versus the going around the world, or like the open circles style way.
Right, the Ouroboros. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that conversation is still up, because it's like super interesting to me. Yeah.
I doubt it, but I'll remind him.
Yeah. Why do you doubt it? Did you hear like?
Well, I mean, he's just so busy, actually. Like, I hardly hear from him at the moment. He's
Nate,
just
you're
really.
speaking of, yeah.
Yeah, neat.
That's you. And I'm sure
We'll see.
Peugeot doesn't exactly have a lot of free time either.
No, I don't think so either. Yeah.
I think this is important, though. I think this is a conversation that needs to be had. So I hope it.
Well, I'll
moves forward. Yeah.
pass that on to him.
Cool.
Hey, somebody's waiting for that.
Yeah. That's me. So
Jonathan's waiting for that conversation to happen. He wants to clip the hell out of it.
yeah, I made actually, I have open circle videos of both Nate and Peugeot.
Yeah,
I'm
it's great.
excited. Yeah.
Well, death is not an escape.
No, it's not. It isn't.
A better way of representing how this circularity works is actually like this.
That's cool.
Mm.
Well, I'm gonna have to
Shari.
sign off, my friend. So we'll talk to you soon again.